So I got a message from somebody wanting me to, maybe send them over more information to prove that melanated people were the real Indians, and it got me thinking: if I was going to start a video to go through a lot of the sources I found, what would I talk about? How would I explain it? What would I tell you to look at? Well, let's do this. First, you will start to realize we don't really know all the history on this land in the Americas, and you'll start to look up the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Incas and stuff like that, and you'll start to notice them with black skin or melanated skin and locks. And same thing up here, and they have wraps and things of that nature. And then you got people like this archaeologist in videos, and that's also in my videos, where they talk about the migration of those people, how the Maya could have came up north and migrated up that way and started building the mounds. And he's talking a lot about the mounds and the things found in the archaeological digs as these archaeologists. But you also can start going through books of multiple sources, and you start to think about the history that you learned was in a textbook, and you think about the textbooks are just an accumulation of other books, and somebody else read those books and they told you some type of narrative on what they believe had happened. So then you start to think, oh, okay, wait a minute, let me go read those books. What's some of the oldest books I can find in the years people came here? And 1776, blah blah blah, but 1492 for Christopher Columbus. So you start looking for books from 1492 and above or before, and then you start seeing what the voyagers said. Oh, many voyages, and there's book names and sources. You can click that and screenshot. Many of these people talked about these people being black, melanated, certain things, coarse hair. And you got De Soto, Verrazano, Juan de Ponce de Leon, Cabeza de Vaca, many, many, many different sources. Now, I'm saying random sources. These aren't those particular sources. These are other sources, but there's the name of the book. If you zoom in there and you can Google these names and you can find them to read, you start looking at even like Christopher Columbus's voyage and how he said how in the first page they talk about the Moors reigned in Europe prior to 1492. So that means that melanated people were in Europe prior to 1492 and they were in control of it. So you start to even think about even over there were melanated people before the whole Christopher Columbus debacle. But even in Christopher Columbus's book, he talks about how they were black and darkly colored. The inhabitants were black and darkly colored, and until he arrives at people of such complexions, it's not probable that he finds such articles. He was looking for gold, precious stones, drugs, and spices. And this was his third voyage, because everybody talks about his first. This was when he went to Trinidad and whatever. But anyways, that's just one of them. But you can also start to think about ancient history and what are some of the oldest things they're finding. And you got digs like this. If you YouTube the search 4,000-year-old Miami, it's going to bring this video up, typically one of the first ones, and it's going to be a dig that they're doing in order to build a high rise, and they're finding 4,000 plus year old things. And he says that the site is older than Egypt, the site is older than Mesopotamia, all that stuff. And just like you say, you got people like this old lady here that looks like my grandma, and she's singing a song called the Indian Girl, Indian Children or something like that. And why would she have these old songs about being an Indian? And she says she was Indian too. But you also realize in videos like this that Albert Pike, the dude that wrote Morals and Dogma, the number one top, Masonic book that's out there, he's like there, whatever. He's the one that predicted the three world pew pews, that happened and all this other stuff. So like he was the guy that was set over the treaties, set to set up all the agreements with the five civilized tribes and Indian treaties, and he was a Mason, as well as Walter Plecker was a Mason, as well as a lot of the so-called slave owners were Masons. It was a big Masonic takeover. So that just goes to show that there's going to be a lot of deception within paperwork, within records, within propaganda, and all of that, because we all know the MO of the Masons. But then you also got books like this. I was watching a video. You can watch that video. A good source for it is Sosolina on YouTube. Very great source. He opened my eyes up on a lot of different things I didn't know back in the day. But this was a book that I saw that he had found, which was in Spanish, because the Spaniards were some of the first people, like Hernando de Soto, Verrazano, Juan de Ponce de Leon, Cabeza de Vaca, some of the others. They the ones that came here, excuse me, and they wrote books too, and they also wrote illustrations, and they would depict the Indian like that. But when you find the English version, like I did in the Cornell Library, you will see how they whitewashed the image just by putting a white face on it, and kind of changing that to like a Greek influence thing instead of what you saw before. But also you see things like this on my page where you have the whole thing called the Red Record, which is the current day natives that their whole Bering Strait story, this and that, and they talking about how it was a hoax. I'm talking about these people right here in the university. They talk about how it was a hoax, and they give a lot of historical records on what happened and all this other stuff. So you start to think, well, man, their story is starting to break apart, while our story is starting to gain more proof. You even got old paintings like this in 1675, where you got melanated looking Indians, and you zoom in, you see their hairstyle and all that other stuff. You also got books like this, America, the New World of the Empires, real long book. I haven't read the whole book, but a lot of the illustrations in there start to show melanated Indians, as well as some of the descriptions. I do need to read the whole book. It's a long book. But also you think about the map, the DeSoto. When you type in the DeSoto map, he made a map showing melanated Indians. This was called Tamaricans. They were called the Tamaricans of Florida. And when you take the T off, Tamaricans, it's Americans or America. Okay? And Tegesta is a name that was used in that 4,000-year-old Miami video. They called the people that inhabited the place that they just found out the Tegesta Indians, which gives credit to this map. DeSoto gives credit. There's all kind of DeSoto markers from when he was here. So this is the map of DeSoto. You also have the Chahtas, Chahta. They're the original Choctaws. That's a name that was later produced as a corporation. But these people were fighting to get their treaty with Spain from the early 1600s, if not 1500s, recognized, and they did. Later on in a video I showed that they got recognized. What does that mean? That means that they got paperwork showing that melanated Indians were here in the Louisiana, West Florida area, as DeSoto and them and others came upon the shores, and we have treaties with those Spaniards, that shows our proof of existence, so to speak. You got more archaeologists like this guy right here. There's a video right there. You can type in the name, and they got all kind of archaeological finds that show Hebrew and Egyptian writings all over the place. Why Egyptian? Here he is holding some up with Egyptian inscriptions. Just go watch the video, and he talks about it. There's all kind of urns and stuff. And then you start looking at the slave population census and when they brought over most of the imports, and that some of these people were brought over from the British West Indies, and most of the people that traded Negro slaves to the American colonies was too small before this time. So the most importations came between these times, and not all of them were African. And those numbers pale in the amount of people who existed at the time, which were around like over 700,000 people that they counted in the colonies alone. On this one right here, they counted them in the colonies alone. I also take you through slave ship manifests, so that way you can try to figure out, how that works and what's the proof on the actual capacities of these ships. What do we have proof of ships? What we don't have proof of? And how copper-colored was used as a copper-colored was racist, were the original definition of an American, and how we use that all the time in songs from back in the day, as well as it was in a newspaper, denoting the Indians, us, because we know who's copper-colored. You got more videos that you can find in documentaries of people. She's actually inside of a museum. I'm trying to hurry up. She has their stones that have Black Hebrew writing on them, which are the most earliest form of Hebrew writing. I break down how the whole Clotilda story is a fake, and how they be coming up with these fake propaganda stories on purpose to try to solidify this slave narrative. Same thing with your boy and Roots, how that was whole propaganda, how he got sued and it was all plagiarized. Then you got books like Allegory of the Continents. You can Google this and you'll see tons and tons and tons of American portraits or paintings in Germany depicting us as those Indians. And a whole lot more on my page. So, yeah, man, check it out.